Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
And welcome back, everybody. So interesting that we're talking about this topic today. And essentially, it's for caregivers. If you are taking care of somebody, a loved one, your spouse, a parent, you can't do it alone. You need help and a support network. And I was driving in today, and I haven't heard this song in a long time. The Beatles, A Little Help from My Friends. We all
Yes.
need help from our friends. You can't do it alone. And there's also a coach that can help you. She's joining us today to talk about this topic. She is a caregiving coach, and she's our professional of the year. Marika Humphreys is on the program. How you doing today?
I am doing well. And that is a perfect song for this topic. Perfect song. So, yes, which is a great song as well.
It really is. And I have a crazy memory. So I heard that song and it reminded me, I was the art editor of my school newspaper. And when we would list all of the jobs of people, and wanted to be a cartoonist. So every month I would have a different theme in the the box that showed what people did.
Yeah.
It would always start off with a little help from our friends. And I never forgot that. And when you think about it, you can't do anything in life without some help from your friends and or family.
Yeah.
Especially when it comes to caregiving.
Yeah. Yeah. I did want to kick off this topic by talking about not going it alone. And this is a topic near to my heart because I think when my husband got cancer, we did try to go it alone initially. And I should qualify that because we had, obviously our really close friends and our family knew, and they were supportive. I had tremendously supportive people at my work as well, which was we had incredible neighbors, but I don't think we didn't really reach out and ask or felt comfortable accepting the help that was offered. And then in that way, I meant we kind of tried to go it alone. And it wasn't until his cancer, we kind of dealt with it the first year and all the stuff we went through, and then his cancer came back a couple of years later. And I think then is where we really leaned into embracing help and asking for it, because you have this, sometimes I think you can have a mentality like, oh, we're just going to get through this. We're just going to be strong. And a lot of things in caregiving situations, they can be prolonged and they can go on for a long time. So if I were to give anybody just entering this role in their life in whatever form they're in it, I would say lean into this earlier than later. Don't try to wait to get help. Because inevitably people will ask, people will offer. And that's why I think also we're often shy to accept help, or we feel weird about it, or we don't feel like it's still an imposition, even if they offer. So that's the first point I'd like to make today is just, it is a really good, the Beatles had it right. And they weren't the first ones, we do need help. And in caregiving, you need help.
I think we should emphasize the word friends, because a lot of times in the caregiving situation, it's all good with family, not taking anything away from that. However, sometimes it's a challenge with family. And I know someone going through that right now where, long story short, caring for her parents, her sisters have moved away, years ago.
Yeah.
That was their choice. She's always cared for her parents, which they're about 10 minutes away from her home. And then they got ill, and they needed support. Well, the sisters are in other states.
Yeah.
And it's gotten dicey who's going to do what. And she doesn't really ask. She's uncomfortable asking for help. They'll come up with excuses, and now she's taking it all on herself. And I'm like, ask them. And you know what? It drives me crazy because I say to her, that was their choice. You supported mom and dad for decades
Yeah.
while they went off and did their thing, and it's all good. They were healthy. Now they're not. Now it's time for them to hop on a plane a week at a time. Oh, by the way,
Yeah.
they're retired. It's not like they have the time. They don't have jobs to worry about. They retired young, etc. Um, but my point here is sometimes
Yeah.
it's hard to deal with family
Yeah.
asking for
Yeah.
help.
Yeah. I think, one of the things, well, I first want to talk about the two different kinds of help that I think we often need when we're caregiving. And because this falls into maybe who you're asking for that help and being open to where that support comes from. But the two ways that to keep it at the simplest form, I like to think about it as you often need practical support, and that is support from like people
Hmm.
help doing chores,
Yeah.
um, errands,
Yep.
some physical tasks, maybe even maintenance around the house or something,
The
laundry.
logistics, right?
Yes, those
Mm,
kind of things. And then there's emotional support. And I think we often think about the practical support,
right.
which is very valid. But if caregiving does fall on you primarily, or maybe you share it with, your siblings or whoever else, emotional support is really important too. And so I think we do need both types of support. And I think it's good to think about the people in your lives that can offer both types of support. And then the second part of that is, yeah, being open to where that support comes from. I think in the case of your friend that we've talked about quite a bit in this podcast, because it's so, it's, I think so many people can relate to, it's just a hard situation. And then there's all the sibling dynamics that I'm sure goes into it. And,
Mm.
that is a very hard thing to navigate.
So
Um,
I have a question based on the logistical support and the emotional support.
yeah.
So it's easy to ask, well, sometimes not easy, but easier to ask for the logistical. Hey, Marika, I got to take dad to an appointment, medical appointment, and mom needs this. Could you possibly, if you're free, could help me out with this? That's, one ask on the logistical
Yeah.
side.
Yeah.
What do you do on the emotional side? Many of us are afraid to even admit that we need help in the
Yeah.
emotional area. I need somebody to talk to. Um, how do you approach that?
Yeah, I think I think with the emotional support, I mean, we all need, and it's usually just one, I mean, even one person is sometimes all you need. Um, Select people. I think with the emotional support, think about the people that you are who can be there for you, or who you feel comfortable being open and vulnerable with,
Mm,
because you will need someone. And if you don't now as a caregiver, you will likely, if you continue in that role, to just be able to share and kind of unburden the emotions that you're going through, the fears, the worries, all the things that go along with being a caregiver. We need to share that with someone. And I mean, that is one of the main things I do as a coach, but it doesn't have to be a coach. And I mean, obviously it could be a therapist as well, but it can also be a friend, a close neighbor, but it needs to be someone that you can feel open and vulnerable with. And so that is where I would, for one, encourage you to find that person, like
mm,
encourage everybody to find that one person. And um and then also you can teach them how to be that emotional support. And I'm only half joking here, but a lot of times, even with those, let's say you do have that close friend who just always listens and you've always had each other's back, teaching them how to be I call it holding space, which
mm.
is just to listen with love and compassion and not try to fix your problems. That's the only danger when you don't have a professional who's
Yeah.
providing emotional support is a lot of times as friends, right? And you're like talking about your friend, right? You want her to not be in pain. You want to, help her, but she's got to figure it out, right? She's got to find her own way. And sometimes we do need advice, but a lot of times we just need to like get it off our chest. We just need someone to sort of listen as we process through what we're going through. And the act of listening is
Yeah.
huge.
Yep.
Listening with love and compassion and that is a huge it's a huge gift you can give someone. So
It's so
yeah,
true.
acknowledging that's an important part of support and then finding the right person for it.
I think I shared with you, I'm in a men's group and we're not permitted to give advice. We'll
Yeah.
listen, but we don't give advice. I guess unless somebody asks. And it probably should be the same way because I
Yeah.
find myself in those situations outside of the men's group, um, suggesting something. But then I think back and I'm like, "But I never asked." So, maybe it's better to shut up and just listen.
Yeah, and I do think, I mean, there is value. I'm thinking of someone also in my life too, who often offers advice, and it's very welcome, and it just gives me a different perspective.
Sure.
So I think probably, and I don't want to discourage that at all. However, the listening piece is probably more important, and then it is, I think, nice to ask as well. Like, hey, do you mind if I? Do you want some advice? And on the other
Hmm.
hand, I think
Hmm.
learning to re- to request the type of support you need. So this is what I do in my life now that I never used to do is I now say I just need to vent or
Hmm.
I just need to complain
Hmm.
or I'm just going to, whine for a little bit. And it's a way of saying like I just need to unload and I just want you to listen to me. I don't need you to fix anything. I don't need you to comment. I just need to like
Yep.
whine for a little bit because that's important too. So you can also communicate. We can also say, look, I'm just going to complain for a little bit. Do you mind? Can you just listen? I think that's totally valid. So, um, those are ways that you can help teach your good friend, how to support you is by saying exactly what you need. Like, I just need to unload or complain about this. And then once I get it off my chest, I'm fine. Or, you know, yeah, I'd love your advice if you've got some. I mean, that's great. The more we can teach others how to support us,
Hmm.
it just like takes away the guesswork.
It's
It's
funny
just,
that we're talking about this because it also serves as a reminder to those of us that are trying to support a caregiver. And I'm going to
yeah,
remember this one thing that you just said. I've found myself in situations where somebody is in a situation and I'll say, you should blah, 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 blah.
yeah,
I'll never do that again.
yeah,
I'm going to say, do you want some advice?
yeah,
Because then you're asking them if they want to hear it, as opposed to just delivering it.
yeah.
And sometimes we forget that, but maybe they don't want advice.
Yeah. And I think there is, we've talked about this before, but for all of us, just acknowledging, like we want our trials and tribulations and our pain and our suffering to be acknowledged. We want others to go, oh God, that sucks. Oh, that must be hard. Oh, so sorry you're going through that. That must be rough. Like, because a lot of times when we're sharing like that, it is just we need that minute of acknowledgement. And
Mm,
when as friends, which we all do, we rush to give advice because we kind of want to like fix it for them.
yes.
And it is so easy to see it from the outside perspective. We're like, oh, they just need to
Yep.
do this,
Yep. And it comes from a good place.
it's
You're doing it because you care, right?
absolutely, absolutely.
Mm,
But I do think it's important to just remember that one, it is acknowledging other people and just their pain is important. And that kind of like, I think it allows you, when I get that, it allows me to like kind of move on. And ideally we do that for ourselves. We acknowledge like, yeah, this is hard. This is really hard.
Yeah.
But sometimes it's nice when someone else goes, yeah, that's got to be hard. That's just hard. And you're like, yeah, it is. And then you can move
I want to
forward.
ask you based on all of this now. Now you're making us think. Is it okay when somebody is venting? I got this going on, I got that going on, to say, I'm sorry you have to deal with that. I know that can be really challenging. Should we say that? Um, how should we say that? If you're hearing it from somebody else, you're letting them vent, you want them to know that you care. What's the proper
I
terminology to use?
Yeah, I think that's a great way. The way you just said it, I think is great. Like, man, I'm sorry you're going through all that. I have a good friend that does this really well. And I always notice it when she does it. She's like, oh, I'm sorry. And it's not her fault. Like, gosh, but she's just like, oh, I'm sorry you're going through that, and I think, I don't think the words exactly matter, but that example you gave, I think is great. And
Okay.
saying things like, oh God, that must suck, or oh, that is hard, or I get it, man, that I've had that happen and it's hard, just some sort of acknowledgement. But even just going, yeah, yeah, I've noticed with other people, like I've watched other people do this, and it's really interesting. Once you start paying attention to this kind of conversation, when you see
Mhm.
others having it or when you're having it, you will notice the people that are really good at that, really good at just listening, just kind of listening and acknowledging. And
Yeah.
sometimes they don't say a whole lot. Sometimes they just go, yeah, uh-huh.
It's so
Yeah,
true, but many of us, especially men, wired to be fixers. So right
yeah,
away, you want to do something. Well, try this and do that.
yes,
You ever think of this? Just shut up.
yeah.
It comes from a good place, but
Yeah, it does. And the other thing I think that we overlook there is in our desire to help someone else is it is so much more powerful to find our own answers. When we come to our
mm,
own conclusions and figure
interesting.
out our own solutions, because ultimately, yeah, we can get advice all day long. If we're the ones that have to take action, like it's much more powerful to find your own way, right? What works for you. And
Mm.
what is even probably better than advice is asking good questions like, wow, what do you think you should do? Like, that's a great one. Wow, that's hard. What do you think you should do? And they'll be like,
Ooh, I
oh, I
love
don't know.
that.
And yeah,
Ooh, that is good. That is drop the mic, the Marika mic. That is
yeah,
really good because now you're putting it on them. You're still listening. What do you think you should do? Wow.
yeah,
I remember
yeah.
that.
And it's amazing. I mean, these are the secrets of a coach, right? We just ask really good questions. That's like the secret of the job. Therapists, too, right? We just ask good questions because a question causes someone to reflect and think about it. And then when you're doing that in a way that you can kind of talk it out,
Yep.
for most people, that helps them work through a solution. And the solutions we come up for ourselves are always going to be better than a solution that someone else gives us if it's our own problem, right? I mean, so and that is what builds confidence also. And in caregiving, you need all the confidence you can get. A lot of times it's
Mm.
just there are hard things to navigate. So the more that you can kind of build up your confidence working through those things, the better.
That's another great point in telling somebody that they're doing a good job. Many of us, I'm sure, in the caregiving world feel
Yes.
that yeah, maybe that,
Yes.
yeah, you have that those doubts that maybe I'm not.
Yes.
Just to say to somebody, I want you to say, you're really doing a great job. You
You
really,
know, I I'm so glad you brought that up because that is also true. And that is such a great, we all need to hear it. I have a client right now who is um her husband just passed away from cancer and she's got two young kids. She's a physician. She's also taken on this executive role in her hospital and she just has a lot of things going on in her life. But I see her having coached several people who've lost their spouses and kind of navigated through that time. I see how well she's managing. I can see it. And I told her that just our last session. I'm like, I know it doesn't feel like it, but you're doing really amazing. And you're moving forward in the way that you need to and kind of facing things head on and reflecting. And she's like, oh, thank you. It feels so good to hear that because she's doubting herself, right?
Yes.
So I think that's a beautiful thing to do for others is to reassure them and obviously in a genuine way too. But yeah, we all have doubts. And so being
Mm.
able to just say, the fact that you're even thinking about this, or the fact that you keep plugging away, or keep showing up, or keep trying to figure out how to, make it better or whatever, navigate through this just shows that, you're doing a good job. You're, this is the hard things in life, right? We got to navigate through them and just moving forward is,
You
is,
you
yeah.
open the door to a question I'd like to ask you, and you've been very transparent. You always are in your journey. Were there times in caring for your husband that, as a caregiver, you doubted yourself?
Oh, 100%. Yeah. I mean, lots of times I can think of, um, I think there was like many conversations, often I think this is why I have such compassion now for caregivers, especially because you're caught between feeling for them and I mean, especially when it's your spouse in that really intimate relationship. So my husband was battling cancer, and so what he was going through was just like I had such compassion, and I thought, God, this just got to be awful and scary and frightening. And at the same time, I also was going through it as well, from the spouse being the spouse, and this is my, we have a child, and like my own kind of perspective on this challenge. So you almost have it like kind of you're looking at it from two perspectives, and we often sort of diminish our own side too. So it's hard to. There's a lot of times where you're on your own, you're on your own problems, and you feel like you need to be more thinking about them. And then when you're thinking about them, you're suffering, and so it's just a hard
Mm.
place to navigate. There was a lot of times a lot of times where I felt um, like I wasn't doing a good job,
Yeah.
But I mean, that's where coaching made such a difference, I think, because I learned to focus on how I wanted to be. And that was the part that I could control because I couldn't control how he was, but I could control how, present I was or how much I was able to, show him love. And once I started focusing on that, then I actually showed up in a way that I was more proud, vice when I was kind of trying to ignore my own problems. And that, then I just got depleted.
There's so many emotions when you're
Oh,
going as a
yeah.
caregiver. There's just every single day, every hour. We're out of time.
Yeah. You just scratched the surface on this one.
I know, but such an important topic
Yeah.
because you can't do anything alone in life.
Yeah. Yeah.
Ultimately, especially when there's heaviness on your shoulders with all of
Yeah.
this.
Yeah.
Um, and
Yeah.
then there's somebody like you that exists to help people. What's the best way to connect with you?
Yeah. My website is a great spot to find me, coachmarika.com. And you can set up a consultation with me there. You can find my podcast there. I've got a free training on the website. So that is the place to start.
I want to tell you from my heart, I mean this. You're doing a great job in terms of these podcasts and these topics and making that awareness that there are people that care and there
Yeah.
is support. So for that, I thank you. I really do.
Well, thank you, Steve.
Just-
I appreciate that.
y-
These have been fun. It's great. It's great. The conversations we have are great.
The journey that you've been on, and that journey didn't end. It
Yeah.
continues
Yeah.
as you share your feelings and what you've learned along the way. Thank you so much for being here. We'll catch up next time.
Okay. Sounds good,
Thanks.
Steve.
Are you looking for even more of the podcasts and hosts that you love? The Podcast Business News Network is proud to announce that you now have even more ways to listen live. Check out the MyTuner Radio, online radio box, and Simple Radio apps on iOS and Android, or find us online. Search for Business News Network on mytuner-radio.com or search Podcast Business News Network on streama.com and onlineradiobox.com/US. Take your podcast on the go and don't miss a minute of the action.
Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
For nearly 2,000 severely injured veterans, everyday life has become filled with barriers.
Day-to-day simple tasks can become pretty daunting.
I have to carry my chair up 2 flights of steps or have somebody do it for me.
What scares me the most is just the falling.
When I'm struggling with my house, I think, to have that one great barrier just knocked down, it's crucial.
Home for Our Troops is a wonderful nonprofit that builds a
mortgage-free, fully adaptive, handicap-accessible house.
And there's no catch.
It'll be our very first home that we've ever owned.
This is a game changer.
This is where your life begins again.
We need you to join us in completing this important mission. Please visit hfotusa.org and help build homes and rebuild lives.
Because of you, everything's going to be okay.